Good morning. It is 9:30 on January 26th, and this is the Budget Committee third meeting. We have all of the Budget Committee members in attendance, I understand, and lots of counselors, so we will begin the meeting. Thank you for everybody agreeing to be on Zoom today, and I appreciate your patience as I try to navigate sharing on Zoom and all the watching for the hands that are coming up or not. So feel free to flag me, and Kathy will assist as we're going through. So we have no regrets from the committee this morning. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none. We have no consent items. We have no confidential consent items. And we start with discussion item 5.1, which is the Commissioner of Community Planning, Neil Garvey. So Neil, you are up first, and we look forward to your presentation.
Thank you, Chair Haslett Theo. Good morning, Chair and members of committee. I'm pleased to present the 2023 Community Development Commission budget. Next slide. Our mandate, very simply, is to create safe, vibrant, and inclusive communities. And that's driven through our programs. Next slide. We have 7 program areas. Economic development, which joined the Commission in February of last year. Planning services, building services, strategic business services, municipal enforcement, and parking. And those can be found on tabs 2, 4, 5, 7, 12, and 27. Next slide. This slide illustrates very clearly the importance of revenues to the Commission, with $30 million in revenues coming in to offset our operating budget. Next slide. This view represents by program area how that 6.87 million net budget is distributed. It also shows how our capital plan fits into the goals established in the program budget. Next slide. The theme for 2022 was technology application and community connectivity by providing new online tools such as licensing applications, piloting 3D building permit applications, and introducing real-time parking information in downtown. We enhance the citizen experience in producing efficiencies that allow staff to focus on value-added services. One of the things that has been a success for food establishments the last few years has been the patio program. Until this year, through COVID, Council has waived the costs associated with the program. With the sunsetting of that COVID-related program, we are looking for a way to phase in those costs. We are coming to Council in February with our recommendation, which may include use of the accommodation tax or tax rate stabilization reserve to make sure that program, which is very valuable to the community, continues. Next slide. With the passing of Bill 109, and with it the introduction of new compressed timeframes for planning approvals with financial penalties, for non-compliance, our measures will change. Next slide. While we are not in direct control of the outcomes on this slide, it's interesting to note that pre-pandemic levels of occupancy rates have returned. We are updating our economic development strategy in 2023, which will help focus activities to enhance employment opportunities in Oakville. Next slide. As we wrestle with the impacts of Bill 23 and addressing housing affordability through enhancing market availability, the importance of completing planning work that aligns with the urban structure as identified in Livable Oakville has never been so critical. Being able to direct growth to our designated areas allows us, to the greatest extent possible, preserve the character of our existing neighborhoods. In 2023, we will continue with projects that will significantly shape our community for years to come, including the Downtown Cultural Hub, 5G deployment, the planning work for Midtown and Uptown, and the continued refinement of our online planning tools. The Film Office pilot project will utilize the municipal accommodation tax, revenue from applications, and tax rate stabilization necessary, tax rate stabilization reserve if it's necessary. Next slide. The net tax levy impact in 2023 is $6.87 million. That's up from $6.51 million in 2022, which represents a 5.5% increase year over year. Next slide. By program area, the biggest drivers of the increase are the two new FTEs in planning and a significant increase in our contract for animal control. Next slide. Bills 109 and 23 we've been developing a response, and part of the response is adding the two new planners. This is the key drivers for this ask are the pressures from Bill 109 timeframes, changes in commenting responsibilities evaluated as impacts become understood, new mandates for housing supply, responsibilities for parks and open space planning, as well as significant works in heritage conservation that we'll have to address. Just by illustration, we can see last Monday when we dealt with a complicated issue of rental housing in Oakville, and the Bill 109 prescription is to bring that back sometime in the first part of April. You can see how there's much work to do, and that's being done by a planner, and to get this effective responses back from the applicant and then evaluate those is going to be a challenge. And the addition of two new FTEs will certainly help allow us to do the work necessary to try to achieve the compliance with the Bill 109 timeframes. Next slide. Moving to capital. Next slide. Our program in community development is not big, but there are some significant initiatives going on within the commission. Next slide. The three highlights on this slide include $1 million for planning reviews and studies, and this is an aggregated number that includes a number of smaller studies, but it does include $400,000 for the Kerr Street, Bronte Road, and the remaining streets in downtown. And there is a staff report on today's agenda relative to that. We also have $1.3 million for the first phase of modernizing services department, and $4.1 of the downtown garage. Next slide. I want to spend time on a significant initiative that's been going for some time. Since 2018, and perhaps before, the Community Development Commission has been on a journey of modernization. The CDC modernization Oakville goals are to make development approval and permitting services more modern, streamlined, and easier to navigate. And also to provide better customer service experience, make our processes clear, more transparent, and predictable, speed up our processes without compromising quality or rigor. We've built the foundations. We've done things better. And looking ahead, we're excited to build on these successes. In 2023, we'll be developing and implementing the next stages of digital transformation, doing things differently and doing different things. These stages are about actively monitoring and measuring the performance of the property development service and continuously identifying and implementing new opportunities to improve, all of which will result in doing different things. In 2023, we are including $1.3 million as the first phase of a 3-year, $2.8 million program to modernize building services, which is being funded by the Building Reserve. This includes a suite of software solutions and 2 contract resources that will support the following digital plan projects over the next 3 years. We're developing a permit wizard, which will help identify and help citizens navigate which permits they need and navigate the importance of concurrent applications. e-plan review and circulation software implementation. We're going to improve our online services in general, and the improvement to our back-end system, Amanda, which make it easier for us to draw data from. And we're also initiating a digital twin to support residential zoning bylaw and project review, and that's to do with 3D modeling of applications. Next slide, please. There are a number of referrals and reports on today's agenda. Firstly, there's $400,000 included in the capital budget, and results will be included in capital plans for streetscape improvements between 2024 and 2033. It also includes downtown street improvements to be coordinated and included in the capital budgets going forward. The downtown cultural hub, planning for the new library, performing arts gallery, and parking facility. And there's also other park improvements to be included along the way. So there's $1 million included in the 2023 capital budget. And for 2023, the program initiatives include retaining project management and direction, downtown parking strategy and property rationalization, as well as a facility location and construction staging plan. Thirdly, there is a tax relief heritage program report. That report was requested by council, and the staff report options on it. The impacts range $1,000 to $1 million, depending on the rebate options. Uptake. It's not included in the 2025 and decides that it's a worthy program. We would need additional staff support over and above the program. And I would point out that currently we do have $120,000 grant program that we offer citizens to help facilitate construction and rehabilitation programs of their heritage properties. Next slide. Oh, there was one more referral, which was the Christmas lights, which I think will be reported. Colin might mention this, but will be reported on in the near future as we resolve some of the issues and coordination with the streetscape plans. With that, Madam Chair, I will return it to committee for any questions you may have.
Thank you, Commissioner. I just want to check with a sort of a look around at the table. Is everyone hearing okay? There was a bit of friction on the line. Is it clear for everyone? Okay, so it must just be me.
Little bit muffled on my end as well, but okay. I can make it out.
So if we can all try to speak loudly, that'd be great. I believe Councillor Adams, you are up first.
Thanks very much. Good morning, everyone. I wondered if you could go back to the slide that had the upcoming projects. One of them was regarding management noise from motorcycles, I think. And I wondered on that particular piece, whether it would also be responding to the outstanding item on council's outstanding item list regarding noise from modified vehicles.
Perhaps if Jim's on the line, I can get him to elaborate on the details of what we might be reporting back and the status of that and when we might see that. If Jim's on the line. Yeah,
it's an item that's about 2.5 years old now. And so we're still waiting on
it. Through you, Madam Chair, happy to answer Councillor Adams' questions. The item on, and sorry, I'm having a little trouble on my end with technology, so I hope you can hear me, but the item on this presentation deals with the actual the actual motorcycle noise enforcement program. But the noise bylaw itself that's going to respond to the council request will also be presented in the first half of this year. So both will be dealt with. The actual function of the enforcement continues, and the update of the noise bylaw dealing with this issue will be brought forward this year.
And so does the funding that you've got, does it provide sufficient funding that would allow for the capture of enforcement, or let's assume that there's an update to the bylaw that would extend the issue to modified vehicles. Is there sufficient funding for resources to chase after that?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would suggest that it's almost a two-part question. The bylaw that comes forward will deal with the actual regulations around that. Staffing resources and implications of that and other issues will be dealt with. Another item you might see on the in the presentation is the municipal enforcement strategy, and that'll be wrapped up into that. And we'd like to bring that forward at the end of the year as more of a wholesome look at municipal enforcement.
So if we update it, so when did you say we would be seeing an updated bylaw? The end of this year?
You'll see the updated bylaw the first half, likely May or June.
Okay, and so if we updated it, passed it, and it was passed for the summer, we would have half a year of dealing with enforcement using existing resources, and it would be only in 2024 that there might be an update to that?
Through you, Madam Chair, that would be the intent. In all likelihood, if we pass the bylaw, I would suspect that if we pass a bylaw in May or June and there are any technical updates, there'd be an implementation period as well. So it wouldn't necessarily occur right after that. So it does make sense to get some experience with it and bring forward a more holistic municipal enforcement strategy. Okay,
so that would include a public communication component of it, presumably.
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, it would.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Next up is Councillor Elgar.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. Thanks for the presentation, Neil. Neil, Conservation Halton, I understand, is not allowed to comment on planning.
We're having trouble hearing you, Alan.
Oh, okay, because I haven't got my headset on. Can you hear me at all?
A little bit, yep.
So the Conservation Halton is not allowed to comment on planning applications, I understand. What does that mean for your staff at the town?
So this is one of the examples of the work that's being downloaded to our staff, and part of the drivers now that we're looking for additional resources. So there will be the responsibilities to our staff on commenting on the things that CH would have normally commented on. So we'll have to find ways to comment on the environmental initiatives that are reflected in applications. So it does, Councillor, have a substantial impact on our staff. We're still working with CH to try to refine our processes and see what level of expertise we need in-house. So it's a bit of a work in progress, but we know that there will be additional resources required for that.
Okay. Now I noticed in the budget, you know, it's always here's what we need this much more. Did we have any projects in 2022 that should reduce our costs in 2023? Like, I never seem to see that in a budget. I show you we had this program and it's going to have all these savings. Did we have anything at all in 2022 in that department to actually cut our costs?
So within Community Development Commission?
Yes.
So we have undertaken process reviews, and I would say that we've streamlined our processes, but I don't believe, and I'll look to Jonathan maybe to help us with that. There's nothing that actually falls to the bottom line. We've just created more capacity to do more work. So that's really been the objective of our initiatives, is to create capacity to do the work. So okay. Otherwise, we probably would ask for 4 or 5 FTEs.
Now, at our meeting on Monday night, actually, Councillor McNeese brought up about a bylaw in Toronto regarding moving people out of one rental place and they have to find another rental place. Do they have that bylaw also in Mississauga, or is it just Toronto, and is it only allowed in Toronto, or could we do something like that ourselves?
Our staff are looking into that. I'm not aware that Mississauga has that ability to, because I believe it comes from the City of Toronto Act. So, but we are undertaking our due diligence on that question, because, and we know it's a significant issue, displacing people who could not normally afford market rate rental housing. So that's an important question for council that we'll have to report back on.
Okay, and if you could check in, somebody called me and said, well, that's in not just Toronto, that's Mississauga. So if you could check into that too, I'd appreciate it. So thank you. That's all of my questions. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Elgar. Councillor O'Meara.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. So I'm just going to go to my notes here. I just got some questions with regards to building services. Are all of our inspectors in our building services, is that like planning where it's 100% recoverable from permitting fees?
Yes, that's the case, Councillor. So
I guess my question is, why are we only adding 1 FTE when we continue to hear about, you know, delays in getting permit to build? I mean, what's our hesitation here to try and obvious then from the we can't find people, but are we trying to get more and could only land 1, or what's the rationale behind just getting 1 if it's fully recoverable?
So there's a couple parts to how work flows. In 2021, we initiated online application submissions, which had it was allowed. We were able to streamline our processes on the front end of things, and now we've been working for the last couple of years, the last year or so, to refine our back end process as well. So we need to make sure that our processes line up, and we've significantly reduced our timeframes for building permit issuance just on some of the simple changes that we've made. So our hesitancy is to make sure that the way we do things is the best way, optimizes the uses of our existing resources before we ask for more. That's been our approach. It's not to say that next year we won't add more people, but I think our approach has been to do things differently so that we can try to maximize the use of our existing staff. If Ralph wants to elaborate anything else, then I'll leave it up to him.
Thanks, Dale. I think you said it all. What we're trying to do is recognize the benefit of the changes we've made, and then look for staffing adjustments based on what happens there. Neil is correct in that we've made significant improvements on the timelines for issuing permits. The biggest focus has been changing the relationship with the applicant and the constructor. We're trying to improve the communication, and you see in our budget, we're looking for more tools to advance that relationship and the user experience.
Okay, yeah.
Highlight that just a little bit more. If we realize that if we are more active at the front end of the application, then people have a higher quality application and things go better, as opposed to getting an application and issuing a refusal letter and going back and forth. So it's about changing the relationship at the front end so we get better quality at the back end and people are more engaged and they understand. And what we're seeing too is we're trying to fix the relationship between the owner of the application and the project executor. There's a disconnect quite often between the information that's flowing. So we're trying to engage both parties. If it's a contractor, we make sure that the owner is aware of what's going on, so we don't get the finger pointing between and among the parties.
Okay, thanks for that. And I asked on Tuesday about the development engineering. They've got a metric there where we've met our processing time. I didn't see that in the budget in the building permit section. Do we have that information where we might be able to take a look at, you know, I'm sure we meet our 10-day aspect, but are we tracking, you know, how long till we clear a building permit and what's our timelines? And again, I know that applicants and builders, they bear a large responsibility, how quick they get back, but is there anything we can see that we're tracking our time and we can see how we're doing and what the progression is of that?
Ralph, why don't you highlight for the councillor how we track our time?
Thank you. We have the back-end software system known as Amanda, and that gives us the opportunity to look at all the different checkpoints of an application, and we can absolutely generate reports for council if you'd like to see where the delays are and where the bottlenecks are. under the Building Code Act, we're obligated to report on our success at achieving the 10, 15, 20, 30-day permits. The problem with that stat is it's only on the decision to make the decision on the permit rather. It's not to actually issue the permit. If we're unable to issue the permit, we must provide all the reasons why we're unable to issue the permit. And quite often that's where the delays come in. We're waiting for the applicant to respond to the request of the plans examiner, and then for the plans examiner to find time to re-review them. And going back to the previous question about staff, we're trying to look at the improvements to better communicate the expectations of the applicant. We put some great resources in place already. We have a newsletter, which we share with anyone that's interested. This is what's happening. We hold regular meetings with the building industry to let them know what our expectations are. And we're open to communicate with anyone that has inquiry. We take that information and build a tool to respond to it.
So the challenge that we're trying to deal with, as Ralph highlighted, is we can meet a metric but not have a great customer experience. So we can issue a refusal letter, we can make a decision, but that doesn't really help anyone. We want to make sure that we minimize the refusal letters as opposed to minimizing the time to make a decision about a refusal.
Well, yeah, and I mean that's sort of I know that's the difficulty. I'm trying to find out how we switch a little bit of the responsibility onto our staff to help applicants get through the process as quickly as possible, rather than just saying you haven't done what you need to do, go away and come back when you've done it. I mean I'm trying to find out how we're giving more of a concierge service to assist, you know, so that we get it all right the first time and we don't frustrate builders by throwing something at them that wasn't on the first refusal letter, but now it's on the second refusal letter. And they said, well, that was never brought up to me, you know, the sort of back and forth here. But I know we're going through those processes and the changes in the back end now, which I'm very optimistic, and I think it's going to be a great thing. But with that, I guess then, Neil, are we also looking at not just how to automate, but are we looking at how to streamline and how to make, like almost using a focus group to say, what can we get rid of? What can we minimize through this online process that will help people, you know, get through this as quickly as possible, but still making sure we're doing the job properly?
Yeah, so we actually have regular meetings with the building industry to get feedback. But I mean, you highlighted the most important piece, and I think we've made some progress in getting to that front end piece. And it's about helping our staff understand the role is facilitation, not adjudication. So,
okay.
So we've got a bit of work still to do, some training that we want to instill. Our staff are coming along really nicely. I think you've hit on the nail on the head there, is that we want to be at the front end. We are, like I said, we do have regular meetings with the building industry to get that feedback, and I think that's what you're suggesting, a focus group. And we are doing a pilot project with Mattamy to test out different, you know, when they have a mass building permit applications of the repetitive applications, how we can move those things differently so we can spend more time on the more complex things. So there are a number of things that we can do. I think your suggestion of a smaller group might be a good one. Ralph, do you have anything else to add?
Just building on that, we have provided plain language training for our staff so they can understand that not all applicants are architects and fully understand our process. So we're working on engaging the staff and the applicants, as I said, in plain language, encouraging rather than just to send an email or a refusal letter, to pick up the phone, make contact with them, invite them to meet on the Teams meeting so that they can ensure a meeting of the minds. We're also, as I said, with the newsletter, opening up conversations. If we learn of anything, as recently as last week, there was a concern from the BIA that they weren't understanding the permit process. Next week, we have a meeting set up to speak with them and fully understand what the concerns are and start providing a solution for that. So we're very receptive to anything we hear that's a problem for someone, because maybe we don't understand it. As soon as we hear the problem, we look for the best solution.
Awesome. Great news, guys. Thank you very much. I just want to switch to the parking supply strategy for downtown, which I saw about $250,000 of funding for. I believe we're expecting the pilot parking project report in Brawny to come back at some point this fall, but I don't see any dollars allocated to parking supply in Brawny or Kerr, or what we're going to be, what we're planning on doing with that. I just see for downtown. So is there maybe somebody want to speak to where that is and why that might be?
Jim, can you highlight where we are with the Bronte parking study?
Absolutely. Through you, Madam Chair, to Councillor O'Meara. We don't have dollars this year for Kerr or Bronte. We anticipate the parking strategy that we have coming forward will confirm, and it may create some opportunities to change regulation. But the focus this year will be on downtown. But as you know, Councillor, it does become a resource issue. We'll look to downtown this year. And then as we move along and we gain a little more experience with Bronte, some effort will go into that. And I just highlight one of the main reasons we haven't done a whole lot in Bronte this year is because we still haven't confirmed that that pilot is going to be a permanent go forward issue. So once that gets done, that'll enter the cycle and work will be done. I do know we, although not on the books as work we're going to do this year, we do have some ideas for some smart technology that we're looking at for Bronte, and we'll be having some discussions with you and the BIA in the coming weeks and months to talk about what that program will look like.
I appreciate that, and I understand there's a process and a cycle. I think everyone in this council and this committee meeting is aware of the daily vehicles getting towed out of here and the daily demands for us to do something. So it's kind of difficult for Councillor McNeese and I to go, yeah, it's in the cycle and we'll maybe review it, and at some point in the future we'll figure it out. I think we have to have a little bit of urgency here with regards to what we're going to do, because I think the people have been tolerating it now for about 4 or 5 years, and I don't think it's very easy for us to go and say, well, wait another 2 or 3 years and we might find out. So maybe if I can just leave you with a little bit more urgency in maybe Councillor McNeese's voice and mine, I'll leave it with that on the parking strategy side of things.
I can certainly appreciate that, Councillor O'Meara. The part of the challenge that we're facing is the urgency of the parking issues in downtown based on the deterioration of the parking garage. So that's kind of accelerated our timeframes on the downtown parking strategy. Fair
enough. Thank you. And just one last question, Neil, with regards to the money for the film project coordinator from the MAT. I'd like to understand the tourism aspect of the film industry in Oakville, and why that's for tourism related projects and infrastructure. Do we have a sense of how many hotel stays the film industry in Oakville causes, or what the local, do they go to restaurants, or are they just in a catering truck? I'm trying to find out why this is a tourism related thing and not an economic development thing.
Through you, Madam Chair, it's both. There is a tourism opportunity. We had discussions with Visit Oakville about this project, and the reality is it does provide a great economic benefit to the areas that see the filming, and part of the pilot is to understand to what extent it is a boon to the hotel stays and the hotel industry, the accommodation industry in Oakville. So while I don't have a clear line of sight to answering your question, part of the purpose is to make it a pilot, not a permanent, and to fund it in part by MAT, that is to understand its tourism benefits. So, and we're doing the economic development strategy this year, where we have to look at tourism and our role in it, and how we can use the MAT reserve to benefit the accommodation sector and tourism in general in Oakville. So while we don't have strong numbers, the purpose of the pilot in partnership with Visit Oakville is to try to measure that as well.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you're aware, I am chair of Visit Oakville of the tourism board. So I think we probably need to lean in a little bit more with the tourism board on this. and align, if we're aware of what their strategy is, if we're aware of what their business model is, and try and figure that out. Any, as the DMO for the area, any funding that comes that's tourism related through the province or feds comes through RTO3 and will go through to Visit Oakville. So we should be trying to align where the town is investing that money and what focus is for driving tourism from the DMO. So perhaps we can maybe do a bit more of a deep dive on that. I'm all on favor of this. I just think we need to make sure that it's tourism related, and there should be some legacy element out of this as well, that sort of there's something to build on. But yeah, I'd be interested in making sure to see what with the metrics we're going to get out of that money on that, because I think there's a great potential there. But I see catering trucks and I see film industries packing up and going to Toronto for hotel nights. I don't know if they're going to Oakville Hotel. So that's my concern with this, is trying to just make sure we're aligned. And maybe just lastly, can you give an update on how much we have in the MAT fund from the town side?
So the town side has about 1.6 million in the reserve. So, and this project occupies 78,000, I believe. So there is a big amount of money there.
Yeah, perfect. Anyway, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, committee members, for the time you've indulged me.
Thank you, Councillor O'Meara. Just further to that, before I go to the next questions, can you just confirm who does make the decision about spending of the MAT funds?
So it's my understanding that it's up to council to decide. Jonathan, you want to elaborate?
To you, Madam Chair. The way the MAT reserve was set up is that it's to be used for tourism related infrastructure opportunities as approved by council. So any decision would come through to council to use those funds through the budget process like we are right now. So
further to Councillor O'Meara's point, so Visit Oakville will prepare their thoughts with economic development, and it would come comprehensively, or are we doing small amounts through this budget and see others later through the year? I just want to understand the bigger picture of how that's being approached.
No, I mean, so far it's been project by project. If Visit Oakville has an initiative that they think is worthy, we're in discussions right now about a couple of things. They'll bring it to us, and then similarly, like the film project office, will bring it to them. So it's been somewhat ad hoc, which I think we need to change. That reserve is growing, and so we need to be a bit more strategic on how and have a plan, and that has to include, as Councillor O'Meara mentioned, that has to be in partnership with Visit Oakville. So we make sure that as the councillor mentioned, the legacy is available for all the residents of Oakville. So Rebecca, is there anything else you want to add?
Through you, Chair Hansel-Thiel. No, I think you've covered it there. We've talked about in the development of the economic development strategy this year, taking a look specifically at what the mechanism is for determining what's funded and making sort of a longer term plan for how that money is funded now that we sort of have this pool of funds. So it's part of our strategy this year to take a look at that and really develop a longer term plan in partnership with Visit Oakville, because as Councillor O'Meara, you said, we want to make sure that we're aligned with what we're doing and that it makes sense for the goals of Visit Oakville, for the town, and for the community in general. So it is part of our plan this year to take a look at that.
Thank you, Rebecca. All right, Mayor Burton, I saw your hand up, and as a committee member, I wanted to make sure I go to the committee members first. Is it still up or is it down?
I took it down because my question got asked. Thank you. Perfect.
Okay, over to Councillor Chisholm.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Neil, for that reports. I got a couple of questions with respect, and it kind of triggered with Councillor O'Meara. I sat on the tourism committee too, and we went through this whole process of developing and acquiring the accommodation tax, which I think has been beneficial for both organizations, the town and Tourism Oakville. What the challenge is, and just to add to Rebecca's comments, when we're looking at it, can we consider that it is a partnership between Tourism Oakville, but also economic development, but also recreation? All those three would suggest that there are events, and having some quality of definition with respect to what would be funded through the accommodation tax. I have some challenges with the film direction too. I'd like to see if there's any measurement on that with respect to tourism, but the idea that we have tournaments, we have special events that happening in Oakville, we have the major Bonspiel, those type of events, we need to clearly articulate a special event strategy with all those three bodies coming up with something that council has some understanding what we're going to approve and what we're not going to approve, because I don't want to get into the idea of being subjective with respect to these type of events or functions. So if when you're in this discussion, working out the details, that we have some kind of, I don't like the word memorandum of understanding, but some kind of definition so council has some degree of decision-making based on factual information and good information that we can provide those answers and approvals for. So that's just my comment on that, Neil, and to the economic development and recreation. The second point is the patio. I've had a lot of feedback from our merchants and retailers about the patio insurance. Is it possible that we do a comparison with the insurance costs with other municipalities? I understand that there is some pressure with respect to some of the smaller retails and so forth can't afford the insurance. I understand that it has been increased to 5 million, or it's recommended to 5 million. I might be incorrect with that, but that was my discussions and understanding. So I would like to something to come back and saying this is the comparative with other municipalities of our same population and so forth. I think that's very important. The patio program has been very successful, and has great benefits, but we just don't want to price it out where some of the retailers and restaurateurs can't afford it. The other point too, under the DESP, which is the under the forestry part, is there any consideration? I know there has been talks and maybe consulting services with respect to forestry, the amalgamation or the consolidation of forestry. There seems to be a lot of confusion with respect to who has responsibility with respect to the development side and the town forestry. There has been discussion, the consideration of amalgamating this or for efficiency. So we were talking about efficiencies earlier. I'd like to see if there is efficiency available financially and staffing wise for that to come together down the line. So if there's any possibility of some of that coming back. The other part, I jump on Councillor Ramirez's comments too, with respect to the building and the front end. I'm glad, Neil, that you're being more of staff being more assistant. The culture has to change to be more assistance with respect to helping these developers and architects get through the process. Where I have some difficulty and challenges, and I don't know if what our relationship is with the fire department, but when the fire department goes in fire prevention, they go in and they do their notes and hand and say, you have to get this done, and there's really no front end or assistance from the fire department. Is there a possibility of working with the fire department to assist them by saying, pass it on to us and we'll help out in the meantime? Because I've had a couple of residents when the fire department comes in, there's what do you call it, deficiencies, and they don't know where to start. So maybe is there a possibility to look at that in the future to bring that forward on the front end to assist our residents? And I think that's the last of my comments. I'll leave that with you, Neil, unless there's any response to my questions at this point in time.
Sure. Just a couple of things I'll mention. Trees, I think Bill 23 has made things simpler. I don't know if it's better, but they certainly limited the ability to protect trees through the development process. But Commissioner Bell may mention this in her presentation, but that is an area that she'll be looking at, the whole tree permit process and the who does what. So that is on tap for 2023. And with respect to fire inspection, Councillor Chisholm, your comments are very timely. We're in discussions with fire right now to see how we can best deliver fire inspection services including helping our residents navigate through the process, for sure.
Thank you, Councillor Chisholm and Commissioner. Mayor Burton does have his hand up, and as a committee member, I'll go to him next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate following Councillor Chisholm because he's the one who tickled this note. The Blades are bidding for the 2024 Centennial Cup in May of 2024. And I know this is the 2023 budget, but I thought that maybe I should mention this forthcoming thing. It touches a whole bunch of our goals and objectives beyond hockey. There's tourism, there's economic development, there's teams and their families from 9 different places come for this thing. It could be a very big deal, and I hope that we can reach out to the Blades and see what they, if they need any help from us to have a successful bid.
Thanks, Mayor Burton. We actually have been contacted by Visit Oakville and they're seeking our support and perhaps sponsorship through the map tax reserves, which we'll be reporting on to council as soon as we have more detailed information. But we can certainly offer support. I think it's a great tournament, and it would be great if Oakville could capture that one.
Well, I'm concerned that in a competitive process like this, and the decisions being made in March, that we need to be, I think we need to exercise a lot more initiative and got to lean further in. We got to skate in hard on this if we're going to be able to help, because it's going to be over before, if we wait, it's going to be over, and we'll see. But let's jump on this, because this is a hockey town, and this is a very big hockey event, and it's got a huge economic benefit to one and all. So I think we should skate hard for this one.
All right, we'll muck it up in the corners, and we'll do what we can.
Thank you, Mayor Burton. Well said. Councillor Dudek.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just want to focus on 2 things. One, the heritage request in terms of the tax relief program. Originally, Councillor Giddings and myself brought that forward for consideration, given the fact we've heard from several residents who have heritage properties, why we're not looking at it. That being said, having seen the fulsome report that you provided and the amount of staff time and, what shall I say, support that would be needed to have it be a success, I'm quite happy at the current time just to stay with our grant program. And given Bill 23, this is not the time to put more demand on your staff, especially when it comes to heritage. Heritage is the one that's being impacted by Bill 23. So fully appreciate that. Just wanted to share that for other members of council, that we're fully aware and appreciate the fact you did all that work to provide us such a fulsome report. The other one I wanted to add on, and this is the beauty of hearing from various members of council in terms of their frustrations or their successes. And I wanted to be able to share, the building department has made huge steps forward in trying to work with the development industry. Those one-of people who try to develop their property can be very problematic. I found the building department, I think we're always going to have complaints no matter what we do. So it's just the nature of the beast. But I wanted to acknowledge that whenever I've contacted building in regards to a concern that somebody didn't feel they were being heard or responded to, building has been very prompt in getting back and going that extra mile to extend a hand to assist them through the process. So I just wanted to add that for the discussions at hand. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor Dudek. Councillor McNeese.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Neil, for the presentation and overview. Just had a couple of questions. You mentioned with the increases for the year staffing, we understand that. And then you also mentioned the contract for animal control. Could you just briefly, is that due to coyote issues or is it otherwise? Or
so in the fall, council considered the contract for animal services with the Humane Society. It came up for renewal, and it has to do with acquisition, and Jim could probably elaborate a bit better, but their staffing costs have increased, the equipment needs replacing, facilities need updating. So it substantially changed in the order of $360,000 over and above our previous year. So Jim, do you have any more elaboration that you want to offer the councillor?
Thanks, Neil. Through you, Madam Chair, to Councillor McNeese. Absolutely, I think you've got it right on, Neil. A lot of this has to do with level setting. Animal control through the Humane Society was, a lot of their officers were underpaid compared to the industry standard. And through this contract negotiation, the goal was to bring them up to a level that where they could keep staff for a longer period of time. So in doing that, it required the contract to be increased by a fairly significant amount. And as part of the approval in the fall, staff were directed to do a cost benefit analysis going forward. So before we negotiate the next contract, we'll look at the cost benefit of that contract and any changes we can make going forward. To make sure we're getting value for money from that service.
Okay, so nothing specific to increase coyote enforcement or anything. It's more of an overall, as you described, increase.
Through you, Madam Chair, what I would say is by ensuring we have a consistent level of staffing through the animal control service, and I would note that it's not just animal control that manages the Coyote Town, and bylaw enforcement officers also work on that. So, but ensuring we have a constant level of staff both through animal control and bylaw enforcement, we're better able to respond to those coyote concerns as well.
Okay, thank you for that. And actually just another one for Jim while I have you here. Just on the parking study, just wanted to echo Councilor Mero's concerns. And meeting with some of the property owners, my understanding is there's about a half dozen cars per day still being towed, and we hear from many of them. I thought the pilot parking results, we were going to start getting some information in Q1 through a staff report. Is it? I thought I heard Councilor Mero mention Q4. Could you just confirm when it is?
Through you, Madam Chair. Yeah, by the end of Q1, we anticipate bringing back the parking management strategy. So through that process, you'll start to get information from there. I did want to highlight, I know towing and Bronte has been a large concern and one of the drivers for us implementing the town's tow truck bylaw, which was quite a large endeavor and pretty successful in its own right. But I do want to highlight that this year, or last year really, the province passed legislation that will take over towing, tow regulations, and that will come into effect over this year. So we're working on the transition with the province and how that'll work. And because of that, you'll notice in the rates and fees, there's a split fee for tow truck licensing, because we do anticipate that to transition over this year. But that will have some impact on that, and I'm certainly not going to say it's going to be positive, but it will have some impact, which we're going to have to review over the year, and we will be in conversation with yourself and Councilor Mayor on that.
Okay, so just to confirm, at February or March's council meeting, we'll have an item related to parking in Bronte, and we'll start getting some information that we can work with.
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, we are looking by the end of Q1. We haven't picked a date yet, but by the end of Q1, we are looking to bring back the parking management strategy.
Okay, and then also as sort of interim measures, I know, I believe you and I, we've talked about some signage and things like that, but my understanding, it doesn't need additional funding. That's part of what you do anyways.
through you, Madam Chair, yes, the signage is part of the existing bylaw process.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. Just wanted to move over to affordable housing. Councillor Elgar brought that up, and just confirming. I mean, it seems, you know, we dealt with it on Spears. My concern is this is going to be a trend of, you know, we used to see our older apartment buildings sort of get fixed up and some people get displaced, but now it seems like the economics of it is, it makes sense to tear the whole thing down, build something bigger, and many people, you know, get displaced. That has a big cost to society in different ways, right? So, so I understand with these new staff people, we should have some more resources to look into some partnerships or solutions, or whether we need an expansion of inclusionary zoning or things like that. Is that correct, that with these new staff we'll have more capacity to do that, like that those items will be sort of in the job description of skill sets, or are we going to need to reach out for some expert consultants in how we deal with this?
Through you, Madam Chair. So the new FTEs may or may not be specific to housing. Like, so our policy group has on its work plan a residential strategy. So that will include some of the issues that you're referring. The FTEs will provide additional capacity for things like development review, which may trickle down into capacity in other areas. So that's how it will be distributed. But primarily, those two FTEs are for the development side, and how we're going to respond to some of the offloading of environmental comments, the regional planning comments, and integration with the official plan, the region's official plan. It's integrated into our plan. So there's a lot of different things that we're going to have to shuffle around a little bit. But specifically about the housing piece, it's on the work plan, and it will be coming forward to council.
Okay, so it sounds like we'll have capacity in-house. There might be some shifting around to, you know, take a look at what was suggested by council and more as to some of these options, in case we start getting more and more applications like this. We can hopefully start to get ahead of it and explore all the options we have. And I know it's a shifting landscape from the province, and you know, we'll probably have to seek some intergovernmental partnerships as well, which all takes time, right? But so it sounds like within those 2 additional FTE and some moving around of capacity, you feel that you have resources to do that?
That's correct, Councillor. Okay. We do have some flexibility to bring in expertise from the outside, our regular course. So sure, we can augment our resources through different means.
Okay, thank you for that. I do have some streetscaping questions, but it might be best if I think there'll be another presentation that dives into it after this. Is that correct with the staff report, or?
No, so the staff report is there for comment. And if you've got questions, then I'm happy to take them.
Oh, I should do it now? Okay. So I understand that the focus in Bronte on the streetscape is around Bronte Road, which is sort of, I guess it's a block south of Lakeshore, because I understand Lakeshore Road reconstruction will take care of some of that. Through discussion with Councillor O'Meara, we have other side streets that also accommodate businesses, just kind of going, you know, from west to east, Jones and Nelson and East Street. And I think as these sites, as we get more and more development applications, that we get some consistency in the streetscape, as I think Bronte is kind of going through the largest transformation of the built form. You know, our buildings are going to be a lot closer to the street than they currently are, and things like that. Not to mention most of the parking for our businesses around these side streets. So I think it's important to have some consistency there for the village. And I understand there may be, through talking with staff, an increased cost of broadening the scope to Bronte Village versus just Bronte Road. I'll also add Ontario Street, which sort of is the extension of Bronte Road. So I'd like to sort of put that out there. Councillor O'Meara may have some more details just on the past of this. I know it's sort of getting into the long-term plan, but if we don't do it now, we may miss some opportunities of when these buildings get developed, that we have some contiguous standards so that the village kind of feels like it was all done with the same inspiration instead of, you know, hodgepodge done over time. So just wondering if you had any feedback or thoughts on that.
So we can certainly accommodate the expansion of that study. It will increase cost, I think $100,000. So from $400,000 to $500,000 in consultation with staff, we think we can do that expanded work for Bronte Village for the extra $100,000. It will lengthen the time necessary to complete the study because we have to do more. It's more work, more consultation. So we can accommodate that, and if that's the desire of committee and ultimately council, I will leave that in Chair Haslett-Theo's hands to navigate. But that's the impact.
Yeah, and I just also wanted to emphasize, I mean, at some point it will have to be done, and more likely than not to be more costlier down the road if you know, we realize we got to do it in 5 years or 10 years. And then my understanding is the kind of bricks and mortar improvements is largely paid through redevelopment of properties. So if we kind of get that in place before these properties get redeveloped, there's some efficiency there as well. Is that correct assumption? Or
so the street improvements are made as opportunity lends itself, and it's included in the capital budget as it goes forward. So if there's a street that's on schedule for reconstruction, then we use that information to build that into the capital plan. And if there's a development that facilitates or allows us to capitalize on that, then we'll do that as well. So it's a bit of all things, right?
Okay, if I could maybe just pass it to Councillor Mary, you probably might have some more information on it.
Yeah, I'm happy to wait my turn, Madam Chair,
okay.
or whatever you'd like.
So what I was hearing was perhaps you'd like staff to come back at the deliberations meeting with what the impact would be for that additional work. Is that correct, Councillor McNeice?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, all right, well, we'll make sure that's recorded on the issues for the end of the meeting.
Okay. That's all for me, Madam Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor
Thanks to
McNeice.
staff.
Over to Councillor Nanda.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just had a quick question about, we were talking about special events and bringing tourism into Oakville. We had an event, 10-day curling event at 16 Mile Sports Complex. Just wondering what the success rate of a program or an event like that was a national event. We were told that's usually a yearly event. So do we have certain events when we're considering other pilot projects about bringing tourism into Oakville and how successful it is for us to be hosting these? The success rate and other programs similar or events that we can support that would bring tourism into Oakville? So
perhaps Commissioner Bell wants to elaborate. I know that I think that Visit Oakville will have some of that data that you're looking for. But as far as the town perspective, maybe Commissioner Bell wants to elaborate.
So thank you, Neil. Through you, Madam Chair, I'd like to highlight the fact that as part of my presentation, I'm speaking to a special events strategy review that is going to start in 2023. And certainly our intent is to work closely with economic development. They're currently on our steering committee to look at those potentials for partnership, data collection, other ways we can leverage the outstanding reputation that our facilities have nationally. As I've said to everyone, 16 Mile Sports Complex in particular is a nationally recognized brand of excellence. So we certainly want to be able to leverage that opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nanda. Councillor Chisholm.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of comments, and Councillor McNeice's comments are well taken, but I just want to make sure we keep this in focus. The original request report came from Kathy and myself with respect to the redevelopment of Kerr Street as part of the driving part of this. And graciously, we included also with Councilor O'Meara's comments and added to this, and which I was fully in agreement with. But I just don't want to lose fact that you know, the $400,000 is for design study and so forth. If it's going to create more additional monies, I would really like to understand the 400,000 and how that's going to be distributed with respect to how we're going to do this design work for the two locations, and plus now the side streets in Brawny. If this is creating more of a dollar factor, I'd like to have a little bit more information on how this is going to be redistributed out and allocated the funding. Not to draw lines in the sand, Councilor McNeese, but we want to make sure, you know, we were really driving this for the last couple of years, knowing what's happening downtown. When you cross that bridge, it's night and day with respect to it. And we view Kerr Street as a downtown. It is a one continuous from downtown across the bridge along Lakeshore and up Kerr Street. People that come into our municipality don't see the difference, and I had people question why is Kerr Street different from downtown. So that's the impetus why we started driving this this request for a report. And I'm fully in agreement with Councilor O'Meara of being part of this, because I know Brawny has its challenges too, but I just don't want to lose fact on how we're going to distribute and allocate the funding for the research on this through the design component. Okay, and that's what I understand. This is for design application. I'll just leave it as that. Thank you.
Just further to that, we are going to ask what the additional funds would possibly be to broaden the scope of those studies. But Commissioner, is there any additional information maybe you could bring to the table today or in that report that would help with what Councillor Chisholm is pointing out?
So I think we're reviewing this, Madam Chair, as related but separate studies. So I think we can accommodate the aspirations of both Kerr and Bronte and finish the downtown as well. But we're happy to bring back more details as for council consideration.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Councillor O'Meara.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, and not to sort of beat a dead horse here, but this started for me back in 2017 with our former planning director in pursuing a CPI, community planning initiative, and he told me, you know what, that's going to take too long. Let's just look at a streetscape improvement plan. And here we are in 2023, and I'm staring down the barrel of a 10-year plan to do a streetscape. So I'm not sure how I got the end run on that one a little bit, but that was just my concern, is that, you know, what started out is, okay, maybe we can just do Lower Brawny because that leads on to the boardwalk. And then in this report, what I'm reading is, no, this is going to be the 10-year plan and how we execute. So what my original thoughts were about let's just do Lower Brawny Road because it's dangerous and people are falling onto the road with strollers. And then we go onto a beautiful boardwalk. Let's fix that. I think the scope of the report we have here is more than what I had envisioned. And if it's going to be more than what I had envisioned as just a tag along to Councillor Chisholm's and Dudek's, then we kind of got to go all in on this, unfortunately, because that's the way that the report is laid out in front of us, that we're going to spend 10 years and redo this stuff. So I was happy to just have the Lower Brawny Road and make that a place where people walk and shop, but it appears that we've sort of scoped up a little bit in the report. And if we are scoping up, then we've got to, like Councillor McNeese said, unfortunately, this is the opportunity to do it. So, but I would appreciate, I think maybe staff have got the comments of the conversation we've had here, and if they can report back with all of that, and I completely respect Councillor Chisholm and Dudek bringing this forward and the urgency they had with that, and don't want to step on anyone's toes while we're trying to do this. So I'll just leave it there, but you know, I do support, you know, if we're going to do this, we've got to do it because costs only go up, they don't go down as far as I'm concerned. So I'll leave it there. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor O'Meara. Councillor McNeese.
Through you, Madam Chair, yeah, just want to emphasize in full support of Kerr Village's redevelopment. So I think that's why we sought out what the additional costs would be, and we understand it may, I guess in the timing of it, you know, we wouldn't seek to slow down anything that happens with Kerr. We understand if our scope increases, it may slow down our process, but as Councillor Mara well said, we just don't want to lose those opportunities through redevelopment so that we can get some cohesion in our village as these new redevelopments come through. So and thank you to Ward 2 councillors for bringing this up originally, and fully support their process. We're just looking to sort of add on a bit more while we're at it. So thank you.
All right. And hopefully this is not a fist fight. Councillor Chisholm is up.
No, I wasn't aware that we could make comments with specific comments with respect to the reports. I thought we drill down. I would talk to Colleen, but just a couple comments about the report, and I just echo Councillor Mayor's comments. 10 years to develop this. If there's any consideration of tightening up this schedule, 10 years, we're talking 2030. I was on it, you know, I guess in my world, I'm looking at 5 or 6 years to have this done. Is there any consideration, Neil, through you, Councillor, Madam Chair, with respect to tightening up the schedule of the more like six or 7 years rather than, because I'll be a firm believer, if we get to the 10-year part, we're still going to be delayed. It'll probably be 12, 13, 14 years. And no disrespect to staff, but that's just the way things happen sometimes through the process. So is there any consideration of tightening up the schedule?
So through you, Madam Chair, we can look at that. I'll work with Commissioner Fu on and Director Stephen on the capital planning aspects of it. So we'll take that back and under advisement and see, you know, following the study and following the design, how we can make some of those improvements at an earlier stage.
Thank you, Neil. That's the end of me. Councillor has a deal. I'm finished. Thanks very much for your indulgence.
Nope. Always good discussion. All right, I want to just make sure I haven't missed another hand. I think I've got all the hands, so I do have a few other questions of my own. So as a follow-up, just on bylaw and municipal enforcement, one of the challenges that we often hear is we had parks enforcement to some degree during COVID. We have 4 temporary mobility officers, I believe, in this proposed budget. Will they have the capacity to provide any level of, you know, check on any problems late at night in a park, or what is their capacity to continue to support the level of enforcement we need? Because I heard in an earlier conversation, it's a resource, there's resource issues around certain efforts. So I just want to, maybe Jim, if you could just give us some clarity. What will be achieved with these 4 temporary mobility officers?
Through you, Madam Chair. The 4 mobile compliance officers will take us to a level that we believe can, it's certainly not the, sorry, I'll give a little history. Originally, we indicated in the 2016 municipal enforcement strategy that we thought by 2022 we'd need 8 officers to meet the enforcement demand. To verify that, we're working with KPMG and conducting a municipal enforcement strategy, just to make sure our assumptions at that time are still correct. So the 4 officers in the budget this year are really just to keep us at the water level, to do what we're doing now and not let things, the normal enforcement, patrol, parking enforcement, all those good things go below a level that the current service level. So your question with respect to parks, can we add parks into it with those 4 officers? Unfortunately not. At this point, we're not enforcing parks, and with the current staffing levels, we couldn't add that in.
Okay, thank you for that. Well, I still have you. I have some questions just around follow up to Councillor Adams' questions around noise bylaw. While I understand that there's, we're going to get the report, then it's a regulation, then there's an implementation. The frustration grows as we, as they fire up the different blowers, the music gets louder, and it is a residential request that, as you know, it's climbing. So is it a resource issue to be able to put enforcement in place if the new bylaw makes any changes? Because as you can imagine, it's frustrating for people to hear we may have a new noise bylaw, but we're not going to be able to have additional resources to support enforcement.
To you, Madam Chair. There's a couple answers to that question, and what I would highlight is the bylaw that we hope to bring forward is going to be very innovative. So we're going to hope to do streamline some of our processes in keeping with the science and noise enforcement, so we can't stray from the science that's out there. But we do think there are opportunities to be more effective in the enforcement that we currently do. So hopefully that'll create some opportunities. But you're absolutely right. Noise enforcement is a big piece of what we do, and it does take, in a lot of cases, more than one officer to conduct that enforcement. And when we're talking about motorcycle noise enforcement, that takes not only ourselves, but Halton Regional Police to be involved. So there's coordination, and sometimes, unfortunately, either our service requirements or their service requirements don't allow us to conduct as many noise enforcement dates as we'd like to. So yes, resources do play into this. And again, that's something that we are looking at through the municipal enforcement strategy. I would say that is there a possibility that our service levels wouldn't meet expectations throughout the summer because of demand? That is very possible.
Okay, thank you. Throughout the last couple of years, I've been appreciative of all the help from municipal enforcement on property standards issues and lot control, etc. But I noted in the user fees that those fees didn't go up in terms of a property standard fine or administrative fine. Is there a reason, given the increased amount of staff time, that it shouldn't have been raised?
To you, Madam Chair. We look at we have to, when we develop fees for property standards, lot maintenance, they're administrative fees, and we have to be careful they don't fall into a category that takes them above what a normal fine would be for deterrence. So when we've set those fines, and we also set escalating fines, we do that in consultation with legal and looking at all the factors around us that would drive the fee to more of a fine, and that should go through a legal process. So we will review that. It wasn't on the books to review this year, but that will be reviewed in the coming years to make sure we're at the level that we can be without exceeding it and making it into more of a fine that should go through a different process.
I appreciate that. Thank you. On parking, is there anything in the budget around improving the honk machines that we currently have, the program, alternative parking strategies? I understand will be covered by the downtown parking strategy and then the parking management study. Is there anything around improving the technology that we have with the use of honk?
To you, Madam Chair. Yeah, absolutely. We're quite excited about some of the things that are out there right now in the parking industry, and we are looking at pilots that we can become involved in to learn from. But we do have capital money in the budget to review our processes, and that'll include looking at honk, looking at opportunities to create dashboards, to partner with online entities. I wouldn't say who, but to look at opportunities to make our parking more apparent to the public when they need it.
That would be great, because we don't want them looking down at their phone to try and find the parking spot. Okay, thank you for that. From a planning perspective, I'm just going to shift. Commissioner, appreciate that the 2 headcount, and there's been some discussion around the 2 planning headcount, and you've clarified that they're more focused on development. But I recall that we've had some challenges with finding planning support through RFPs, and it's typically around policy work, was the impression I was left with. I may have misunderstood. And given Bill 23 and some of the important data and the continuing changes that everybody is questioning, a more fulsome reports and access to more information seems to be something that we're all thirsty for, to make better decisions, or at least be able to explain decisions. What would happen if those 2 that are focused on development don't have the capacity to support some of the additional policy work that, when we look at the work plan, is there?
So while I stated that the principal outlook will be on development related issues, I think that still holds true, because they may be in development review, they may be the frontline planner, or they may be supporting those initiatives. So for instance, if we need an environmental a planner with more environmental expertise, they'll support the policy side of things, and they'll also support the actual development review application process. So they will have probably dual roles. I mean, we still need to figure out what the implications and the fallout will be from Bill 23. So, and just related to your comment on finding external expertise, it seems to be in that middle band where it's not quite big enough for the big firms, and it's maybe a little too big for the small firms. So there's a sweet spot of expertise, and we're trying to create internal opportunities, seconding staff into certain roles, and then backfilling with contract staff. We're trying to be as creative as we can. But so while there's no thought, and they will largely be supporting development, they have to, by their definition, be policy minded as well. I don't know if that provides you the clarity you're looking for or not. Maybe you can ask a different question.
It's helpful. I guess my comment would be, the world is changing so rapidly in Ontario, and some of us have had opportunities to read additional reports from other municipalities, and we know the staff have been working really hard to try and address our questions. But even if perhaps you could come back and tell us a benchmark of how our planning department is staffed in comparison to other planning departments. I'm not usually one to say I want to increase the budget, but I guess I'm asking for a benchmark, so that we can appreciate that the support will be there, given the magnitude of the changes that are coming.
Sure, I can see. I don't know.
And CAO Closey has got her hand up.
I did want to add that as a result of Bill 23, there is a transition process. While the province had indicated that on January the 1st, Conservation Halton can no longer comment on environmental type issues. They're still providing us comments on their hazards, but certainly not on the environmental side. The province did indicate that there was some allowances for a transition plan. So I know planning is working very closely with Conservation Halton, the other Halton municipalities, and looking at a transition plan. And that could be extended into even a 6-month time frame. At the same time, we're working on a transition plan with Halton Region in terms of their role in the planning process. So I do think that provides us a bit of an opportunity to really understand how those things roll out and exactly be able to quantify what we take on. So that at the same time, we can be sorting out those 2 positions and how that might help us to support our resources. So I think we're going to be in a better position in 24 to be able to actually articulate exactly what it is we need in order to both accomplish the policy work, reflect Bill 23, and get the development side going. So I think, I know Neil and I had discussed whether or not we needed more, but we thought at this point in time, with those other elements coming in and really understanding Bill 23, we felt that 2 was sufficient at this point in time, but we may ask for more in 24.
And is there a risk that you'll need to come back outside of the budget after you've finalized the transition plan?
There's always that opportunity when we come back with a transition plan. But that's why there's 2 there. We thought that could suffice us throughout the year, but we can certainly consider that when we get the transition plan finalized and understand what those implications are.
Okay, thanks very much. All right, I think that's it for questions for community development. Thank you very much, Commissioner. And I believe Commissioner Bell, you are ready to start?
I am indeed.
Thank you very much. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It is my pleasure to present the 2023 Operating and Capital Budget Program for the Community Services Commission. And we're just waiting for the slides to come up. Here we go. Next slide, please. So the programs and services that we provide include emergency services, facilities and construction management, Oakville Public Library, parks and open space, including cemeteries and harbors, recreation and culture, including both our Oakville Museum and the theater. Next slide. Oh, and special events, which is obviously the top topic of conversation today. So our gross operating budget is 136 million, which represents 35% of the overall town budget. Net, we are at 101 million, which represents 42%. Next slide. The 23 budget is allocated to key focus areas as defined by council. In our operating side, we've invested 43% of our budget to ensure the ongoing livability of Oakville. Our engaged community side is 35%. That's to ensure that we are providing a continuum of vibrant experiences that our residents can enjoy. And 22% goes to the environment, both from a protection standpoint and also enhancement. On our capital investment side, we have recommended $62 million worth of projects. 47% of which are environmentally related, 8% are in the livability category, and 40% are in the engaged community. And obviously much of that budget is tied to the development of the 16-mile community center, library, and active sports park. Next slide. So these are some of the highlights of our 2022 accomplishments. Fire made significant enhancements to their technical rescue program to include surface and ice water, rope and high angle, hazardous materials, mission specific, and confined space. We worked closely with urban planning to complete the parkland strategy piece, which Commissioner Garby has already spoken to. We completed the detailed design in record time for a 16-mile community center, library, and active sports park. And we are looking forward to the beginning of construction in 2023. The OPL launched and implemented their 2022 to 2024 strategic plan, implementing key trends coming out of COVID. Under accountability, we are in full compliance with Emergency Management Ontario with respect to all reporting requirements for our emergency management plan on an annual basis. The facility service review, we have put all of the foundational pieces in place. So we now have a new department design and organizational structure with a 5-district model for facility operations that will be implemented later this year. We have service standards by building category, and we have done extensive process re-engineering so that we are operating on one set of standard operating procedures. Recreation and Culture expanded their online service offerings to include facility rental components, which is last minute ice time, hugely popular with our skating teams, picnics, shelters, and photography events, and arena shooter pads. Under the environment, we did run another program to combat gypsy moth in select parts of Oakville. We also, the facilities team completed phase 2 of the installation of the solar panels on the roof of OTCC parking garage. Parks and Open Space resurfaced and improved a number of trails for our residents, easier access and enjoyment. And COVID, we continued to do restoration of impacted services and restore our whole roster of special events. Just to give you an idea of the surge of interest around special events, in 2019, we supported a combination of town-run and community-operated events to the tune of 158 events in 2019. But in 2022, we supported 247 events. So that is a massive surge. It is clear that people see the events as an opportunity to meet their neighbors and create a greater sense of belonging, which is very exciting to see. Next slide. So around our key performance indicators, as you can see, fire has improved the percentage of response crew travel time to 62%. The number of fire injuries per 1,000 population is 1.9, which is an improvement over 21. The number of residents that are satisfied with recreation and culture, according to the citizen survey, is 81%. It should be noted that at the time this survey was conducted, all of our recreation facilities were closed. So I think that the achievement of 81% is quite extraordinary. Obviously now we are back at full service, and our active participants, when surveyed, have identified a 90% satisfaction rate with the programs that we are providing. And our recreation capacity rates are at the highest that they have ever been, which is very exciting to see. We are still working to bring people back into our facilities. We are not quite at 2018 levels, but we are certainly moving in the right direction. And with respect to kilometers of trails, we have added 11 new kilometers for our residents to walk on. I did want to highlight that there is a bit of an anomaly in these KPIs. If you look at 2018 to 2019, we appear to have lost 3 kilometers. What actually happened is when asset management did their more detailed assessment and categorization of trails, we had to recalibrate to the correct number of 227 for 2019. So that is not a typo. And I'm very pleased to report that the number of trees and shrubs that we planted in 2022 was 33,835, which obviously contributes positively to our tree canopy. Next slide. Regulatory compliances for FCM. We're at 25 orders for 22, and they were all resolved within the prescribed timeframe, and that's as of September 30th, 2022. We were able to bring our costs down for corporately managed facilities to $4.95. If you notice, 2020 and 2021 were at a high, and that was because of increased cleaning costs for high-touch areas in order to ensure a safe environment. And we also did enhancement around air filtration. Next slide. The number of active library card holders per capita is holding steady. And the number, what I did want to highlight was that the number of library items borrowed per capita annually has also gone up to one of our 5-year highs at 10.9 as of September 30th. And that should be 2022, not 2021. Next slide. So here's some of our key 2023 key initiatives. So the first thing that we're going to be undertaking, one of the big items that we're going to be undertaking is the Parks, Recreation, Library Master Plan. It will include an analysis of Bill 23 impacts, but more importantly, it will also speak to how the residents' behavior and attitude towards recreation, both indoor and outdoor, has changed, how they have viewed the library as an essential service, and what does that mean for us going forward. We are also looking at a more strategic level as well, revitalization strategy for our existing system of facilities and outdoor spaces to ensure that our amenities remain relevant for our residents over the longer term. And we are also obviously looking at demographic changes within the context of inclusion and diversity. And also we are looking at trends in sports, both those that have been predominant, for example, such as soccer, and those that are emerging, such as pickleball and table tennis. We are also initiating detailed design for Fire Station 9 in 23. I know that with the intent for construction in 24, I know there are a number of councillors who will want to know what's going on with Station 4. Station 4 detailed design will start next year with completion in 2025. As previously mentioned, I'm delighted to see the level of interest in special events, because we are initiating a refresh of our culture plan, which will include a look at all of our cultural programming. But specifically, we are looking at a special events update. And one of the pieces that we will be looking at, in addition to my previous comments around sport tourism, is also which events should the town be involved in supporting, and how do we want to go forward in terms of supporting the community in developing new special events as well. As you will remember, in 2018, we initiated a recreation service review. I reported out on early wins arising from that review. Because of COVID, we had to pause. Many of you will recall, although it seems like a distant memory now, that recreation was heavily regulated during the pandemic, and that there were substantial changes to those regulations on an ongoing basis, which required a great deal of resourcing. Therefore, we decided to pause the recreation service review because of resourcing issues, but also because we could see emerging trends. And we felt that we wanted to ensure that we were building on current assumptions and not assumptions that may be out of date from 2018. Obviously, we are very proud to be starting the construction of the 16-mile community center, library, and new park in 2023. Under accountable government, we will be tabling the fire master plan as well. It will also include impacts from Bill 23. We will be doing an emergency plan refresh. We will be incorporating all of the lessons learned and best practices from the pandemic. So I'm really looking forward to bringing that plan forward for council's consideration. I think you will see a lot of innovation included in that plan. We have also been working very closely around with a number of teams around the development of security strategy, which is becoming quite a predominant concern. And we will be tabling that strategy and starting implementation in 2023. We are already working on a number of scenarios that will be sorted out early in the year that will include procedures for lockdown, hold and secure, evacuation, and active shooter. And we will also be providing extensive training to all of our staff. We will be initiating the work on the firefighter certification regulation as per the requirements under Ontario Regulation 343-22. And we will also be completing our risk assessment completion, which is also a legislative requirement. And under facility management service review, we have already started work on the implementation planning, and a number of key areas will be in place by the end of the year. Under the the urban forest management plan, we had originally planned to table this next month. However, in light of Bill 23, we are working closely with an internal working group, including legal, to look at what are the implications, particularly as it relates to tree protection, and what tools will still be available, and whether or not we're going to be able to expand mandates of those tools. So we'll be reporting out on that as part of that report. And further to, I think it was Councillor Chisholm's question, yes, we are initiating a forestry service review. It will look very specifically at permitting and all aspects of it, especially in light of Bill 23, but also around different operating models. So we will be reporting out on that later in 2023. And then last but not least, many of you will have heard through media coverage that a number of organizations, both private sector and public sector, have looked to reconfigure their office space to better reflect a hybrid model and support it, and the way that we operate going forward. So we are bringing, as part of a hybrid model implementation, we will be developing a new strategy that looks at all aspects of that. We will be looking at different components such as shared space, and it will impact, we will be doing a lot of work with 4 key departments. So that will be finance and buildings first, followed by purchasing and FCM. The reason why the finance and buildings are going to go first is so that we can reconfigure their space and harvest space, so that then we will be able to move back FCM and purchasing back to town hall, and which will create a lot of positive synergies from an operational standpoint. This means that we will no longer require 6,000 square feet at the Hydro building, which Hydro is very excited about because they need more space. And it also ensures that we will no longer have to pay that those lease costs as well. Next slide. So our gross operating budget broken down by department. Our 3 biggest departments are emergency services at 32%, parks and open space at 20%, and recreation and culture at 31%. Our net operating budget is $101 million as previously stated. Emergency services is for 43% of that, recreation culture 21, and parks and open space also at 21. Next slide. So this is the tax levy broken down by program. As you can see, there's no really drastic increases beyond usual inflation pieces. However, we are experiencing challenges with respect to individual line items, such as fertilizer, some PPE, as an example, that where we are experiencing exorbitant increases, which has led to increases in our budget. I would like to reassure council that wherever possible, we are also trying to find mitigating strategies to bring our costs down in other areas so that the net impact is as small as possible. Next slide. So to the point of saving money, as per Councillor Elgar's question, I wanted to give an update on the facility management review and the recreation service reviews. As you know, they were started in 2018, and we continue to do extensive amounts of work on it. And so I just wanted to remind the committee on what was originally planned. So under KPMG conducted a service inventory and highlighted areas within the town where we might be able to achieve significant cost savings. In the case of facilities, they had recommended that we consider the possibility of consolidation, which we are proceeding with in terms of facility operations. In the case of recreation services review, that was a little more challenging for us. Normally KPMG's experience has been that recreation departments that they've worked with in other jurisdictions have not embraced digitization of a number of their processes, which means that often that is sort of the silver bullet for significant cost savings. Oakville had already been very progressive in that area and is one of the leaders in digitization of our processes and providing online services, and have been for at least 10 years. So for recreation, we had to be a lot more creative in how we would find innovative solutions and cost savings. So the targets respectively for each service review was to find $1 million in savings each. And I'll speak to that in the next slide. We did create interdepartmental project teams to look at all aspects of our operations. Recreation adopted a quick win approach. What they did was they met with their entire recreation team. And the premise behind that was that we wanted to talk to the staff that are closest to the work that's being done, because they're often the ones who have the best ideas around cost savings. And that resulted in our quick wins. And we also have completed all the foundational components for the facility service review. And I've already spoken to the issues around the pandemic, so I won't do that again. Next slide. So we, in the facility service review side, have realized $822,400 in permanent savings. Recreation and Culture has realized $952,000 since the start of the service reviews. Next slide. Just to go into a little more detail around the recreation service reviews. So as I mentioned, we found $193,000 in permanent savings through what I would describe as low-hanging fruit. We eliminated 5 new FT positions that would have been required as part of a 2021 capital impact resulting from OTCC construction. And how we did that was we did an analysis of our entire system, looked at how we could adjust our service model, and as a result, we're able to come up with $554,000 in cost containment. We also eliminated the lease for Notting Hill Youth Center and went to a new model of service delivery for youth services. And as a result, we were able to eliminate 1 FTE and the associated lease costs. Next slide. On the facility service review, we looked at key areas for efficiencies. One was the reduction of hydro and gas consumption, which we were able to do quite successfully and continue to do. We also did an analysis of certain activities where, for example, it had been outsourced, but we, through comparative analysis, realized that we could actually do it more cheaply in-house. So we made those adjustments as well and harvested those savings. And we also changed the service delivery model for OPL facility management, which resulted in a reduction of 1.3 FTEs. And as a result, we were able to save $822,000. I did want to pique your interest for 2024. As I mentioned with the hybrid model, we will be able to eliminate $150,000 on an annual basis for the lease at hydro. This comes out of reserves, so it will not hit the tax levy, but it's still an important savings. And we're also looking at ways through strategic BAS inspections to harvest another $25,000. Next slide. So we have one new request. Many municipalities already have a variation of a community activation grant in place, Burlington, Kitchener, and Guelph in particular. We looked at the way that those programs operated, and we would like to make a recommendation that council give consideration to our budget request of $35,000. Our intent is that we would build sustainability and capacity within nonprofit groups and also informal community groups with a special emphasis on special events to help kickstart some of the work that they're doing in their local neighborhoods through micro investments. We see it as a great opportunity to build partnerships with community grassroots organizations. We know since COVID that there are a number of neighbors that gather in kitchens and plan events that they would like to put into our parks, and we would like to work more closely with them. And we also see this as a great opportunity to support the community in building a wonderful roster of local events and programs. Next slide. Now for our capital budget review. Next slide. As you can see, our capital program is $62 million. And I went through the split previously. So let's go to next slide. So before I mention the highlights of the 23 capital program, I did want to address a particular issue that's come up with a couple of councillors. There are 4 capital programs that have 16 mile in their description. So I wanted to explain exactly what those 4 projects are. The first one is $72 million, and that's pre-approved dollars for the overall new expansion from 2022. But it shows in this budget as 7.2 million. There is the retrofit of the 16-mile existing sports complex, which I will speak to in the next slide. There is 3.1 million that is tied to the OPL collection for the new library. And then there's a small one, which is 43,400, and that's for the existing 16-mile arena, which is for the replacement of the forklift and a new scissor lift. So just to go through a little bit of the highlights otherwise, we are going to be spending 8.8 million in various parking lot, driveway, facility related maintenance and improvements. We are going to be looking at upgrading our card access security system, which is at end of life for $1.6 million. As I stated before, there's $3 million for the master accommodation plan with the key elements of the strategy, the 4 departments, and we're also going to be renovating the former cafe so that it can be used for touchdown stations and also for small meeting space when we're meeting with the public. We're investing $6.7 million in parks, trails, and park facility renewal and rehabilitation, and $6.4 million to develop new neighborhood parks, parkettes, and trails. And we are spending $4.7 million, and that's to support the health of the tree canopy on an ongoing basis through the EAB program. Also to look at invasive species audits and controls for things like Asian longhorn beetle, and also giant hogweed, and any other invasive species that are proving to be issues. We are also going to be spending it on woodlot preventative maintenance and tree planting, and our target for tree planting this year is 1,500. And last but not least, the 2.1 million for the existing 16-mile sports complex for the geothermal retrofit. Next slide. And so on that particular issue, as you know, the new expansion is going to be state-of-the-art, where we are marching very firmly towards a net zero carbon approach. So we are going to be building that complex so that it is going to be operating off of a geothermal exchange system. The current 16-mile sports complex is on a much older system. And given the fact that they will not be operating as separate and distinct entities, the entire complex, we feel, should be operating at the same energy efficiency level right across the whole system. So we are recommending that we put in a capital investment of $2.1 million for the existing complex. which will work on removing all major fossil fueled heating and cooling systems and installing equipment which will enable hookup to the new geothermal field. Our estimated reduction of 160,000 mgs of natural gas and associated carbon emissions, I think will contribute very positively to the net zero carbon target. And we will have, and this is conservative at this point in time, a net annual savings of $20,000 in 2024. That being said, I did want to highlight that the facility team will continue and has continued to do three types of ongoing studies to improve or reduce our energy consumption. So the first one is that they do preconditioning studies, and the preconditioning studies are looking at very simple ways that we can reduce costs and with limited impact. We look at retrofit studies, which look at things like, can we replace roofs, windows, those kinds of things to improve or reduce energy loss. And then the other one is deep energy studies, which looks at a wholesale replacement of systems to move them to something that is more environmentally sensitive. Next slide. And that's all of our presentation for now. I'd be delighted to answer any questions, and also our entire team is here to answer more detailed questions. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Commissioner. So I will go to the committee first, and I believe Councillor Elgar, you are up first.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Through Madam Chair, just at the very last slide, the 16 miles complex, it hasn't been that, it's not that old. And we're looking for a 2.1 million retrofit to get rid of the heating system now. When we did the planning for that, did we miss the boat there on planning?
No, not at all. Not at all, Councillor, through you, Madam Chair. So it was always contemplated that building would be able to enable future exchanges between the arena and heat. So this speaks to that specific issue. So at the time it was built, it was actually built 12 years ago. So while it looks fabulous, it's not as new as we like to think it is. So we are looking at ways to ensure that the entire complex is energy efficient, because 16 Mile, any arena is an energy pig, to be quite honest. And so we're looking at ways to improve that. So no, we did not miss the boat. That was state of the art at the time it was built, and the cost would have been substantially more had it not been designed in the way that it was.
So, but our savings in 2024 are only going to be, is it 24,000 or something? That's all.
26, yeah. So that's a conservative bill, because keep in mind, we will also be looking at other ways to improve the energy efficiency of that entire complex.
I thank you for that, and great presentation, and thanks actually for showing where you're actually cutting costs too, and I appreciate that. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Councillor Elgar. Councillor Adams.
Thanks very much. I have a little list of questions for you. First one is about park waste management and park garbage cans. Chris Mark and Councillor Lischina and I have been wrapping our heads around demands for more garbage cans around our parks and so forth. And part of that, it's not so much the cost of the can, but the management of it, the operation of the can after it's been placed. And weirdly, as an aside, we've had a can that's been stolen twice. And so we kind of half wonder whether we need to have super locks on our garbage cans now. But can you tell us whether we've got sufficient funding should we wish to expand the number of garbage can receptacles in our local parks and trails areas over the next year?
Councillor, I'm going to ask Chris Mark to comment specifically on that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We carry funds within our Parks and Open Space budget to replace cans on a regular basis. We really don't have capacity to add a lot of new cans through our capital impact budgets. We do include that as we're adding parkland and parkettes. That is included, so that is taken care of through the capital impact cost. But in terms of expanding the waste management network, not really, no. We do annually budget for additional in-ground containers, those large, deep in-ground containers that holds a lot of waste and saves a lot of pickups. But again, those are quite expensive, and we try and increase those by maybe 2 or 4 a year, not many. So to answer your question through you, Madam Chair, to Councillor Adams, no, we really don't have a lot of capacity to increase the waste management service. I will say one thing that we could look at for some of the issues that we've been dealing with in Ward 6 and really town-wide is an education program in terms of how people are handling waste within our parks. And I think we maybe can work with the region on that as well, because a lot of people are confused or just don't want to handle waste in the appropriate manner. So there is an education issue that we may want to look at in 2023 that I don't think we'll eliminate, but it may help reduce some of the problems that we're facing on a town-wide basis.
So thanks, Chris. I appreciate that. And I think, as you know, we're not looking to double or triple the number of garbage cans. We're probably talking about adding 5 to 10% in terms of the number of locations that might be involved in, for example, in the Joshua Creek area where we've recently had some issues. If that was the case and we're trying to do that, is there a minor adjustment required in your budget to handle that or not?
Through you, Madam Chair, I think it's particular what you're referring to there, Councillor Adams. We could certainly add additional cans throughout the Joshua Creek system that we've spoken about. The problem is once we put the cans out, they get used as household dumping. Yeah. We are loath to continue to put them back out. In fact, we get calls and emails from local residents asking us to remove the cans because of the constant dumping. However, people just tend to leave the garbage bags where the can used to be. So certainly, as I've indicated to both you and Councillor Lischina, we're willing to try and put some more cans out in terms of trial locations to try and address the problem within Joshua and East Joshua Creek. So that can certainly be done within our existing operating budget. That is not a problem at all.
Okay. Could staff provide a report for our consideration in response to this issue for the deliberation meeting to give us an estimate of what additional resources might be required for either, as you've described, an education element or additional locations for garbage cans?
Certainly.
Thanks very much. So, and whether that's in conjunction with the region or doing it on our own. Okay, thanks very much for that. Maybe I'll, since you're on the line here, I'll skip to the questions that deal with the parks element first. On page 241, there's a reference to 2273 Trafalgar Road versus 2373 Trafalgar Road. I'm assuming the address that's intended is the one associated with the region's former water reservoir site. Is that correct?
That's correct, sir. Yes.
Okay, great. So I think in the book, there might be a typo with respect to the address, but that's fine. I look forward to that coming forward. The other one is there's a list of capital projects on page 248 of the book, and that deals with the cul-de-sac rehab, the pathway rehab, the recreational trail accessibility program. Is there a list that we can have with respect to the current thinking about which locations are going to be involved in those?
Through you, Madam Chair, certainly Councillor Adams, we can provide a listing of locations for all those programs. A lot of them are we looked at again as we come out of winter and into spring, but certainly we do have a number of locations for each one of those programs that we're going to be targeting for this year. So that is not a problem at all.
Thanks. So if staff could provide that list as a report to our deliberation meeting and I appreciate it's a preliminary list that may change based on new information that comes up in April, May, or whatever. Yeah. Thank you. And then can I turn our attention to, in the facility management category, thanks, Chris. I'm done with all questions for you for now. There's a facility management project, which is a town hall feasibility project. And I wonder on that, while I appreciate that we're going to need to eventually consider whether a town hall is the right building for us or whether it can continue in its current format and so forth. I wonder about the timing of that project, given the effects of Bill 23, the changes to planning, where staffing are going to be, whether they're going to be at the region or at town hall, so to speak, and whether that project should be delayed by a year or two. Is that something that's a reasonable thing to consider?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, certainly it would be.
So, so one option would be to remove that project from the 2023 capital budget and have it return in either 2024 or 2025, for example.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. And I guess that should be something that we handle on the deliberation day. But could staff give us? I'm not sure if it's necessary to have a report on that, or if that's just something that we should, when we get to that point in the process, we should simply move a motion that be removed from the 2023 budget and be reconsidered for a future year.
One thing I did want to add, Councillor, is that we would also want to assess the positive impacts of should Council approve the hybrid master accommodation plan, because what it means is that we would be able to accommodate more staff over the longer term in an existing footprint. So it's actually cost efficient. So that would be another issue we want to factor into that study.
Yeah, so that was one of the other things I was thinking about in our discussion earlier about the hybrid model that's obviously becoming a thing that's going to be permanent. We're going to need to consider what kind of facility we need. So yeah. So for all those reasons, I think it would be appropriate to delay that project. And then I have got one other item for you, Colleen, which is we had a discussion about the local community event supports the other day, which I appreciate having had that discussion. I also appreciate the discussion that you just raised about the Community Activate Grant program. Could you, maybe for the benefit of all of council, just highlight some of that discussion? Because what I was going to ask is if you could report back on that discussion and opportunities for a more consistent approach to local community event supports.
Thank you, Councillor. Through Madam Chair, there were sort of several elements. We covered a lot of ground on that conversation. So one was how we could in the short term make a sort of a small investment through the community activation program, should council approve that, to work more closely with a lot of these new groups that are emerging and provide them with micro grants. The second issue, which we will report back on, is around fee waivers, because we have an extensive fee waiver program that supports a number of community events with different eligibility criteria. It can be challenging to understand. And so we were going to provide you with a report on that, and then how it relates to council approved rates and fees. And then the third piece, which I would see as us dealing with or addressing through the special events strategy, is the whole issue of which events should the town be supporting versus those that are delivered directly through the community. So right now, for example, the town supports Canada Day, Remembrance Day, and a couple of other sort of key pieces. We used to do the Children's Festival. If you remember from a few years back, we did not do the Children's Festival in 2020 because of COVID concerns. However, we did repurpose those dollars. And what we did was we did the movie nights in everyone's ward to great acclaim. You know, anecdotally at Iroquois Ridge, as an example, we were supposed to have 200 people show up and 750 showed up with lawn chairs, which was exciting, but it does speak to the broader surge in the community about that need to belong. So those were the three big buckets. Have I missed anything, Councillor?
The only piece that I think you might have missed is we had part of our conversation was about the consistency of supports from all the various departments. Right. And so it's more than simply the fee waivers. There's the issue of how many different departments are attending these events, and is there some consistency about the level of support?
Right. And also standardized elements depending on the nature of the work.
Right. So if staff could report back on that for our deliberation meeting in terms of the support levels and whether there needs to be any change to the funding level or internal chargeback that happens, say, from the mayor's office or elsewhere, that would be appreciated.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks so much. That's everything I've got.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Going to Councillor O'Meara next. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Colleen, and everyone for the work you've done in putting this together. In 2022, I believe in our capital plan, there were funds to repair the broken up concrete around the Bronte Harbor Compass restaurant. That's all sort of chipped away. From my conversations with yourself and Chris Mark, I understand that those costs to repair that came in over the budget that was allocated for 2022. And it appears that that project now has fallen off the wayside. So I'm wondering if staff might be able to come back in this budget with some options to deal with that. I mean, it is one of the more the busier locations we have on our waterfront with you know, hundreds, if not thousands of people in foot traffic walking around there, going to the restaurant. I do have concerns with tripping hazards. I know we patched over some of it last year, but would staff be able to come back with some options on how we might be able to deal with that?
Absolutely, Councillor.
That's great, thank you. Just a question with regards to the online, to the permitting activation grant. Is that like the Burlington's Rock My Neighborhood
yes,
grant?
It is.
Okay.
Yes, it is.
Okay, so you don't have to be a not-for-profit or open one up in order to access those grants?
So we're planning to support two categories, existing nonprofit organizations, but also we have a lot of informal groups that our community development officers and recreation work closely with. You know, as demographics change within Oakville, we have new social clubs spring up and different neighborhood groups. And we want to be able to, first of all, do outreach to them and work with them in partnership, but also to provide them with micro grants that would allow them to kickstart new potential events. Because as we know, most very local events cost around $5,000. So we'd be looking at perhaps $1,000 as a micro grant or $500 that would help them move those events forward.
So would that also include things like if an area wanted to have a street party, there's permitting costs and street closing costs and a number of things that they have to do. Would that count towards that, or would that be possible to count towards these grants?
Absolutely, because we have not set the criteria yet, so we appreciate the input.
Yeah, I'm sure the community would appreciate that. And my last question is with regards to the harbors and the capital plan. There's 3.8 million going towards a variety of things. Is that tax ratepayer supported, or is that passed on to the boaters who pay for the dredging and those sorts of things? Where does that funding come from?
Depending on what the nature of the repairs are, it comes from the harbor's reserve.
Okay, and so where does the funding for the harbor's reserve come from?
So that comes from boating fees.
Okay, so the boaters are basically one way or another paying into that reserve and paying for that portion then?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor O'Meara. Councillor Lischina.
Good morning. It's still morning. Thank you for your presentation. My questions are about TOWRF. And first of all, do we have a number of how many rescues or recoveries in 2022?
We do. I do not have it at hand, but I can certainly get that for you, Councillor.
Okay, thank you. Next question, is the boat a town asset or is it part of the Canadian Coast Guard? Who owns that thing?
I'm going to pass that question to Chris Mark.
Through you, Madam Chair, the TOWRF vessel is a town asset owned by the town.
And what is the life cycle of that? Has it had any recent upgrades to it, or because I just haven't seen anything in the past number of years, so I'm curious about that.
Right. Typically, search and rescue vessels, such as what TOWRF operates on Lake Ontario, have about a 20-year life cycle. The current vessel is, I think, about 22 or 23 years. We have just actually completed an RFP process to look at a new vessel for TOWRF. We were meeting later this week to discuss that, and hopefully coming out of that, we'll be able to make an award for a new vessel.
Wonderful to hear. And just one of the reasons I say that is it was quite the attraction at the Canada Day event, and I was a little scared getting on it. And really, you know, we really give thanks to our volunteers who work on that vessel to help our residents. So thank you very much. I'm glad to hear that. And just a quick follow-up on Councillor Alger's note about the 16-mile heating cooling system. So when it's going to be removed, is there any asset value left there, or are we scrapping it? What's happening with it?
Excuse me. I'm going to ask Kendall to comment on that, please.
Through you, Madam Chair. The equipment will be removed or taken apart carefully, and then we will take a look and see if there is any value or if units can be used at other facilities that we have in the interim if they are not as efficient as the 16-mile units that we're taking out.
Okay, thank you. That's good to hear.
Thank you, Councillor Lischina. Can I just ask for clarification? Were you also asking if the replacement for the new vessel is built into the budget, or where it was being funded from?
I did not, but that's a good question. Thank you, Madam Chair.
So, Chris, could you just help us out there?
Through you, Madam Chair, the TOWRF contributes annually to a reserve. There is a reserve established for the vessel. The concern is that the escalation of costs of everything in general since the pandemic, but particularly steel and things like that and supply chain will likely, the cost of the vessel would likely exceed what the reserve is. So when if an award is made, it will have to come to council as a report, and there likely will be alternative funding options available that we'll work with finance on in order to try and acquire the new vessel.
Is that information that could be available by deliberations for this budget?
I will leave that to maybe John can speak directly to that one.
To you, Chair Haslett-Thiel. That's something we could take a look at. We do have to be a little bit careful as we go through any RFP information, what information we do share in a public forum related to that. So we can report back on what we can report back on for deliberations.
Thank you for that clarification. I'm now going to Councillor McNeese.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair, and thanks for the great presentation. I also appreciate your highlighting of the efficiencies and cost savings. As we do more, we always need to tighten our belt a little bit. So appreciate you going through that process as well. Just two questions, just on the Bronte Outer Harbor resurfacing of the parking lots and some of the pavement there. Just wanted to make sure that the curb cuts at Nelson with the entrance gets addressed. I know that's causing damage to some cars, and I believe that could be part of the scope already, and it's not a new expenditure. I just wanted to make sure that's okay.
Yeah, we will include that in the options.
Okay, thank you. And then I just want to switch over the community activation grant. You know, I haven't been involved with it to date, but I think it's a great idea. Would this be something that's intended to be annual, or is it a one-time program?
So our hope is that it would be annual. However, I think it's important that we report out on it at the end of the first year, potentially as part of the budget deliberation for 2024, so that council can see what the level of impact is and whether they want to continue with the investment.
Okay, thank you. And just to make sure I understand it correctly, so an individual obviously living within Oakville would be able to apply and not have to go through the barriers of a nonprofit or registered charity or anything.
So what we'll do is we'll look at how we want to characterize the informal groups. Our community development officers work very closely with a number of those groups, so they're going to advise us on how to manage that. One of the big things that we want to be careful of is that the process is streamlined. So it's not onerous, because we recognize not everyone's a bureaucrat, and that, you know, it should be easy for them to use and access.
And could I also suggest that, you know, I think it's a great idea, potentially, and I don't know if it's year 1 or year 2, but we could seek a match. There may be other nonprofits or charities or even a corporation that wants to take advantage of your staff administering this, communicating it, all those kind of barriers to setting up a program like this. So if I could just make that suggestion that, you know, I don't know at this point that we need to spend more money on it. I'm sure it's labor intensive on your staff side, but potentially we could get some traction in the community where they might want to pitch in an extra 35 or more. Right. So I just wanted to make that suggestion.
Oh, thank you. And we'll certainly look into that.
Thank you. That's it for me.
Thank you, Councillor McNeese. Councillor Shi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So really appreciate the presentation. A lot of my colleagues talk about the community activity program, so I'm going to talk about this again. So I believe this is really appreciated by the residents, but I think this is something you will get a lot of application, and 35,000 is not enough. And my question is that, what is the difference with this new program grant to compare with the town already have some funds to provide for some formal community organization, non-profit organization? I know some organizations get a few 500 or even several thousand from the town every year. So what's the difference, and what's the amount budget for that? So how this can be linked together, or it's totally separate?
So they're totally separate. We have legacy relationships with groups like the Oakville Galleries, as an example. So that's a long-standing relationship with that organization. And we provide them with a grant, but they also are operating out of a town-owned facility as well. So it's a slightly different arrangement. We also have a strong partnership with groups like Oakville Soccer and Oakville Gymnastics, but they also have a deep infrastructure. They are in town-owned facilities, but they actually paid for those facilities to be constructed. So what we're looking at here is more emerging, you know, neighborhood groups. We recognize there's a big change that's happening in Oakville, which is really exciting. And we want these groups to be able to get a little bit of a helping hand in terms of starting new events and programs. So it's very separate and distinct, and it's a very different demographic within Oakville. It's not long-standing established clubs. There's also Sport Oakville grants that get administered, and there's also arts and cultural grants that get administered through Oakville Arts Council as well, and those are all separate streams. So this is a gap that we have identified, and we've looked at other jurisdictions and how successful they were, and they're immensely popular, and what residents love is that neighborhood investment.
Thank you, this, yeah, really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Nanda.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Colleen, and your team for your great presentation. My question is actually going to be for Mark, going back to what Councillor Adams was discussing in terms of garbage. This has recently become a huge issue. Councillor Chi and myself will be meeting with some residents. We're looking for some solutions. If you could also report back, in addition to what Councillor Adam was asking, in terms of more garbage cans for the trails. So this is one of the conversations that we've had. I also want to say thank you to Chris and his team, who did provide information and a letter for us to share with our community, because we did have discussions in terms of going back and educating the community in terms of not dumping household garbage into parks. And it seems that that has become a bigger issue in our ward. So if you could maybe bring some of that back and see what we can do in terms of solutions, because we will be meeting with some residents to discuss on the regional side as well, solutions on the regional side, as well as what we can do on the town side.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you, Councillor Nanda. Next up is Councillor Chisholm.
Sorry, I lost my wrong finger pushing the wrong button. Jeez, tell ya. Quick questions with the community. Colleen, my background's community development and so forth, and I'm really excited this new development for neighborhood groups and so forth. I always say.
Could I ask you to just speak a little closer to your mic?
Oh,
it's a little hard
to hear me now.
A little better.
Okay. The neighborhood groups, and I always say it's always difficult giving money away, because then you got oversight, you got reports and everything else, and you want to make sure that you streamline this, is that the input going and output. Spending 5-10 pages writing something for $1,000 is not worth the time. However, notwithstanding, in these, I don't know, maybe I'm getting in the weeds with this, but when you're doing this, is there is this a one-shot? This is not a continuous, because I know most of these organizations, once they get the taste of getting the money, they'll come back next year and the next year and next year. So have we have any indication what the limitations are with respect to the dollars?
So what we were, and this is still at the early design stage, so we're certainly open to input. We were looking at a maximum of 2,000 for a not-for-profit and 1,000 max for a smaller community group, because as I said earlier, a lot of their events don't cost a lot of money to begin with, but it costs enough that it might be prohibitive, if that makes any sense. So, you have a group that, the event might cost $1,500, but trying to put that together might be difficult.
With the dollar amount giving, and this it's difficult sometimes, because we're charging for bringing picnic tables and their barricades.
Yeah.
Is the process of saying this money you give us, you take it away, I guess is what I'm saying. Is that going to be streamlined, where you say there's not a grant given, but we would waive the fees for picnic tables, barricades, and all that kind of stuff?
So what we will do is we'll look at it within the broader context of what our existing special events strategy is, and how we administer the fee waivers. And then we will look at how this works with the community activation grant. A number of other municipalities were in exactly the same spot. So we're looking at their best practices and lessons learned on how to best manage this so it doesn't create new challenges.
Good, it's good to know, because I think most of the fledgling organizations and community and neighborhood is basically, it's, you know, they say, well, you know, you're nickel and diming me to death with, you know, I want to get a picnic table and it cost me for this. So I think that's really what the crux of the issue is with a lot of these small organizations, is those type of costs that are related that come from the town. So I'm glad we're moving in that direction. Hopefully it'll be a very successful program. Thanks.
We're very excited about it.
Good, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chisholm. Mayor Burton.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Madam Commissioner, for the exciting idea. I think there's some pitfalls here, and I would be happier if we had the complete design before we allocate for it.
Okay.
And I would suggest that, you know, keying off of what my colleague, Councillor Chisholm, was saying, and from my own experience leading a residents group, it's the fees that where I think we would be better off providing the relief rather than cash. And
okay,
there's once you start the cash, it doesn't stop. So unless you want to have, I mean, we have a complicated, I mean, we have the Halton Community Investment Fund. Let's remember, we're a two-tiered municipality.
Exactly.
We have $3.8 million a year going into the communities that make up Halton, including Oakville, every year, and we're very proud of that. And it goes mostly to not-for-profit, but there's quite a rigorous value for money process there. There's several staff involved in vetting the applications. There's contracts to make sure that what they're promising to do gets done, and that the benefits desired actually arrive. And there's a very clear set of criteria, you know, at the intake level that says this isn't permanent, and you know, you got to deliver, and then you got to apply again, and it's competitive. So there's and we've grown it. It started at, I think, $300,000 16 years ago, and it's one of the things I'm the proudest of having grown in my time as mayor. But I think this needs a final design before we plunge. It's just my suggestion. Anyway, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Burton.
Thank you, Mayor Burton. All right, I'm just checking that there are no other hands that I've missed. Doesn't look like it. So Commissioner, I do have a few additional questions. So I would concur with a couple of the earlier comments that understanding fee waivers and how that process is managed, and the volume of fee waivers that may be provided. I think you've noted that, and you're going to report back on that in community events. And if that involves then being able to give us a little bit more meat on the bone as on the community activation, that sounds like the direction that we would go, or we'd want to discuss. Can you just also include in that the dollars that are assigned for those families that meet this criteria? And I think the community development officers help with this, where they just cannot afford to use an activity that's not just a drop-in activity. You previously have reported that out in the budgeting. So if you could give us that for deliberations, I just want to make sure we still have money there for those needs. On a ward-specific basis, I just want to confirm that small but mighty skate park is actually going to get built in 2023.
It is our goal.
All right, that would be lovely. And for clarity, the merchants and the BIA downtown, the town square revitalization is a 2024 initiative now. Is that?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you very much. I want to turn just a bit to parks. This is more about the team did such an amazing job of inspiring people to just get out and walk and use our trails and winter recreation, etc. But I repeatedly get requests for additional winterized facilities. One lady has actually gone so far as said, just give me a porta potty and I'd be happy. So could you report back on the cost of winterizing some additional facilities through the winter and or providing temporary washrooms for our deliberations?
Absolutely. I think this was a really important issue that arose through the pandemic. And we've certainly made efforts to ensure that our washrooms on the waterfront parks are all open through the winter, either permanent, like because they're winterized or because we were able to put some sort of temporary solution in. So we certainly have that to draw upon.
I recognize the complexities of work in Lakeside Park, but it's not winterized. And sometimes the museum's not open. Just if you could give us at least an understanding of cost
Absolutely.
and impact for consideration. There's been lots of discussion about the special events and community efforts, and I just wanted to clarify that in the budget are things like open house events that you started having in 2022 at each of the community centers, where there was some level of a fair-like experience for the local, well, for all residents, but in particular within that local ward. Is that included in all the budgeted dollars?
So are you, I just want to get a little bit of clarity. So are you talking about all of our activities at our community centers for things like Family Day, or is this more the open houses? I'm thinking of the one that we did at the temporary 16-mile library with our 2 Ward 7 councillors. Are you thinking more along those lines?
So I was referencing open houses. We had a nice open house at OTCC. It wasn't complicated, but it was a lot of fun. Others, I understood, wanted something like that. And it's really just almost expanding on your efforts to encourage people to use the drop-in facilities, to understand what facilities the town invests in, to create some, community goodwill. Is that incorporated into the budget?
Yes, we do. We regularly have open houses for a variety of reasons. And Fire has just texted me to remind me to mention as well the fire prevention open houses as well, that they don't want to be lost in the mix because they're highly popular.
Okay, thanks very much. Thank you for highlighting that when Notting Hill closed, you've now shifted to a different use strategy. So while there's dollars saved on the lease side, there are dollars clearly earmarked for youth engagement and outreach.
Yes, there is.
I just wondered if Councillor Dudek wanted to speak at all about the Santa Claus Parade, just in terms of, contribution and ongoing funding to support what's been a great tradition.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. In dialogue with Commissioner Bell, we do have a motion forthcoming that will capture that. I'm very, very pleased to know that we're going to have some support, not only through her commission, but also Mayor Burton has offered to become more active in regards to supporting the Santa Claus Parade. It'll go a long way to making our parade that much better. And I appreciate the consideration both of them have given in this regard. So I'm quite satisfied that we're getting the necessary support to make it successful.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Dudek. I just wanted to touch on Parkland report from last year, and obviously Bill 23, and you've already referenced, Commissioner, that you'll be looking at the implications of that. In the discussions about the Parkland strategy, there was a lot of discussion about the importance of local parks as well. One of my concerns, and I know that it's echoed by every RA that attended a parks discussion with Councillor Giddings and I, is ensuring parks within local communities, particularly in these high growth areas. Is there some timing around understanding the redo, if you will, on the parks plan?
We haven't discussed timing as of yet. We know we need to review it, obviously in the broader context of Bill 23, but we do not have specific timing on bringing that back at this point.
Okay, thanks very much. Okay, Commissioner, you did an excellent job, as everybody's told you. Thank you very much for all the information. I'm going to look to the committee if you have any additional questions that you want to give to staff, either from these two presentations or the presentations, ideas that crossed your mind from on Tuesday. Councillor O'Meara?
I don't, Madam Chair, but I'd be happy to move receipt of items 5.1, 5.2, and 5.3 at the appropriate time.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Elgar?
Yeah, to Madam Chair, it's a question to Chris Mark, actually. It's regarding the hanging baskets we put on the lampposts downtown. And I've had other residents who live on kind of enclosed streets that they're wondering that one of them's got like six lampposts, and they're wondering whether the town could supply baskets to hang on them. And and the interesting part about this street, it's one of those streets that got built as a condo street. So of course it's not the right standards for snow plowing, for sidewalks, for anything. And they're saying, like, with all these tax dollars, is there any way we can beautify our little street with the hanging baskets that look so beautiful in the town? And does the town make these baskets themselves?
Yeah.
So I've said I'll see what I can do for you.
So through you, Madam Chair, the basket program the town provides is in direct partnership with the BIAs. The town only provides baskets really at Main Library and Town Square. All the others in Bronte Kerr Street and downtown are funded in partnership with the BIA. Yes, we do grow the baskets ourselves in the greenhouse on Cornwall Road. So to answer one question, yes, would baskets be available? But that would be certainly above and beyond the current service level that we provide elsewhere within the town.
Would it be possible for them to actually purchase the baskets from the town?
Through you, Madam Chair, that is something we can certainly look at. There's more than just the baskets. There's the attachment to the poles. And can that be done? Who does that? Watering. These baskets, because of their size and weight, actually don't have soil in their sphagnum peat moss, so they need to be watered 7 days a week. So there's a lot of logistical issues involved with the hanging baskets of the hanging basket program, but I'm willing to have a conversation with any stakeholder group, Councillor Elgar, who wants to have a conversation. But I would say that town support would be above and beyond what our current service level is throughout the town.
I thank you for that. I'll take it offline with you and try to get what the cost would be if they want to buy them, or if through the town, because they are beautiful baskets. The town does a great job. So anything we do to make the town look more beautiful, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, so seeing no additional questions, I just have a few addition, and then John Delabar and Kathy are going to read out what we've asked staff to come back with. There were, in Commissioner Bell's presentation, there was some excellent slides that everybody referenced around service review and efficiencies. And I'm wondering if staff can come back with similar charts from each of the commissions. There were notations throughout, but if we could get it bundled in 1 or 2 slides for us as part of the deliberation, that would be helpful. As well, I understand we are going to get all of this information back by February 14th. John, if you could just confirm that the summary chart of the impact these additional asks would have on the tax levy will be clear on that chart.
To you, Chair Haslett. So what we'll come back with for our agenda on the 14th is we will have a staff report, and any request that's underneath of that, we'll have them all listed out, what the requests have been, because some of them are just for information. Some would have a budget implication. And then during that deliberations meeting, we will also have basically a spreadsheet where we can add in any of those effects so that the committee can see what the impacts are on the tax levy.
Thank you very much. You've been just an amazing amount of help. And my last request is, while it's one of the last pages in the budget book that talks about headcount, if it could be summarized to say what is the growth in headcount, full-time headcount from 2022 to 2023, including part-time and contract, and if any gapping or vacancy is being factored into the overall operating budget. I'm seeing a nod. So, okay, thanks very much. So I understand we have a list, and Kathy, direct me where I can read that list, or if you can come on camera and read it out for everybody, that would be great. You or John.
So, Chair Haslett-Thiel, I've actually just sent the list to all members of council through an email. So if you want to read it out, I didn't get the last couple that you just added there, but all members of council should have it in an email from me.
Okay. Let me get out. Okay. Split screen this. All right. So hopefully, can you guys just wave at me that you've got it, you're reading it through. I'm going to just, I guess I'll quickly read it out and then just let me know if you have any edits. I know that it's important to you, all of these requests, and obviously we'll want to meet your needs. So there was a report back on a bylaw that would support the moving of people between rental housing, a report back on a comparison of insurance costs with other municipalities for patio programs. There was a report back on the impact of increasing the scope of streetscape study from just Bronte to Bronte Village. A report back on the existing staff report and how they can make improvements based on committee comments and incorporate Bronte Village and its impact on additional costs. A report back on benchmarking how the town's planning staff compare to other municipalities to ensure there are adequate resources. Report back on the consideration of the garbage can issue to give us an estimate of additional resources for an educational element and additional locations for garbage cans, including trails. Provide a list of locations for cul-de-sac rehab, pathway rehab, and recreational trail accessibility program projects. That consideration of the town hall feasibility study possibly be deferred to a future year. So just in terms of what would the tax reduction be for that. Report back on a discussion for a more consistent approach to community events, supports, and whether there are any financial impacts. Report back on options on how to deal with the Bronte Restaurant concrete project in 2023. Report back on the number of wharf rescues for 2022. Report back on relevant details for the wharf new vessel procurement. Report back on fee waivers for community events and dollars assigned to meet the criteria. So I think that was Councillor Adams. A couple of us were all kind of asking about that. Councillor Adams, can I just ask you, does that meet your needs? What would your advice be?
So there are two pieces here. So there's M, which is the report back on fee waivers for community events and dollars assigned who meet the criteria. But there's also the earlier one, which is I report back on discussion for a more consistent approach to community event supports and whether there are any financial impact. So the pieces there, I think Colleen understood what the report back was intended to cover. And I'm not sure if there's been a mismatch between her understanding and what's been drafted here, because the discussion was to also include in terms of the event supports were not just fee waivers, it was also which departments are coming to those events and doing what at those events. And so I kind of wonder whether I and M ought to be combined.
So I'd probably agree with that. Commissioner Bell, can we entrust you with that responsibility to bundle it together? Okay. We've got report back on additional winter washroom considerations. And the two that Kathy I had mentioned was a summary chart of service review savings from other departments and a chart that shows the FTE growth 2023 over 2022 comprehensively, including part-time contract and any gapping positions or vacancies that have been factored into the budget. So I see a hand. Councillor Shi, is your hand up? No.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So I have one question, not regarding today's presentation. So does town consider about to provide the snow windshield cleaning service? Because I got a lot of email complaints and the text message today about those issues. Even I spent 40 minutes to clean this morning. So is we consider about this in the budget? I'm not sure. So what is the impact? So what's the cost if we have this provide this service like Richmond Hill does?
So I'm having trouble with sound. So can you just sort of say that a little louder for me so we can make sure we capture it?
Sorry, so is that town consider about the snow or windshield cleaning service like Richmond Hill did? Yeah, so is there any budget we consider about this year or next year in the future? I got a lot of complaints and emails, text messages today, and even I spent 40 minutes to clean this myself this morning.
Well, Councillor Shi, welcome to council in a snowstorm, because we all have probably got questions about clearing. So what you're asking is, can they report what additional snow clearing costs would be for the windrows? Is that?
That's right. Yeah.
All right, we can add that for you.
Thank you.
All right, so seeing all that, oh, sorry, Mayor Burton.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to say that won't be a burden on staff. We've written so many reports on this. They just need to dust off the last one.
Yeah. It's that and leaves. Okay. So I have a motion on the floor from Councillor O'Meara to receive 5.1, 5.2, 5.3. Any members of the committee against the motion? Okay, seeing none, that's passed. We have no confidential discussion items. A few items to just clarify for the public. So the committee, the public delegations start on February 14th at 9:30 in the morning. You're more than welcome to attend at Town Hall. On February 16th, there is also public delegations at 6:30 p.m. at Town Hall. And I believe we also offered Zoom for that, that you could register for. And Kathy Patrick has her hand up. So correct me if I'm wrong there, Kathy.
No, Chair Haslett-Thiel, we still do have the other 5.2 and 5.3 to get movers and motion for.
Okay. I thought Councillor O'Meara was giving me a motion for all of them.
Oh, did he?
I did, yes, if that's okay.
Okay, so you voted on them all then at that time?
That was my understanding. Okay. But thank you for keeping me on track. I do appreciate it. So back to the public. So February 16th, 6:30 is a public delegations. For the public, those that stayed home to dig out their driveways. You can also send your questions into budget@oakville.ca, and staff will answer and respond to your questions. And they actually will summarize the questions that come through at budget@oakville.ca for the committee's information in their deliberations. Just as a reminder, the Budget Chairs Open House, which you can register for, is February 8th at 7 p.m. And it is an informal Q&A by Zoom. So again, you register through budget@oakville.ca. So with that information, I will look for a motion to adjourn. I have that from Councillor Elgar. Any disagreements about that? Seeing none. Everybody have a great day, and thank you very much to the commissioners and the staff and all of you for the great conversation today.